All right, and we are live. Hey, everybody, this is Perch, and I'm here with the amazing Eric Breen. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing very well. I'm very glad you're on with me today. You're always you've read a lot of comics like I have. That's always appreciated.
Probably too many, but yeah.
Well, there's no such thing as too many. It's all it's you know there's never too many. That's the thing about comics. Like even if you hate, and we were talking right before we went on the air, you're not as caught up with the newer comics, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. But you've read, how many comics would you say you've read in the past?
Oh gosh, it'd have to be north of 50,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy part is like if and I granted I'm very sympathetic to the people who aren't finding things out to read right now, things that are new, but there's got to be like more than we're in the hundreds of thousands if you start to count in like manga and other stuff at this point, right?
Oh, I'd say you probably wouldn't even have to get to manga to get six figures.
Yeah, there's lots of comics. Yeah, as you iron say, it's a 6 million comic man, Eric. Literally 6 million comics. Well, I'm glad you're here with me today. It's a punchy day. I've been drinking before we started, so that's always a good sign. Thanks for coming. And let's see what we've got here. Yeah, Eric Breen, comic legend, is with us today. That's awesome. Perfect. Real quick, before you have I always try and do this. You've got a channel, so people can find you. Where do they find you?
My channel is under my own name, Eric Breen. Turns out there's 3 or 4 guys that have channels with the same name. Mine has the logo of the band The Jam that you see in chat.
Excellent. Okay, look for the blue circle, red in the middle, The Jam. Yeah,
I do a video every other month or so, whether anybody wants me to or not.
So you're kind of doing my opposite approach. If you're putting out videos when you have good content, and I'm using that strategy of just shove 3 or 4 out a day. Perfect.
Yeah, I'll go along with that when I have good content. Usually it's after I've done some back issue buying. It people like haul videos. I mean, I know I could watch haul videos all day long.
Yeah,
and those seem to resonate with. I mean, they're never going to get the high views, but I get the people that are interested in comics more than the drama du jour. But it's a small audience, but
it's a good audience. So I mean, I don't know. You get tired. I get very exhausted of all this. Hey, let's look at this. We got a question already. What's your favorite comic of all time? You have to pick just one.
Oh gosh. Okay, I'm gonna have to narrow it down here. Growing up, my 2 favorite, historically, Amazing Spider-Man and the Avengers. If I gun to my head had to pick one, I would say Amazing Spider-Man.
Okay, excellent. Which particular era? Which writer were you loving there?
Stan into. I know Roy did a couple issues into Jerry, like the first, 150 or so. But you really can't go wrong with the first. You're really through Michelini.
Yeah, that's all. Now you're talking like 35 years or so. Right?
Yeah, about 1 through 320 something, and he stayed on after McFarlane left.
Yeah,
but I like that.
Yeah.
Now he stayed on after that, but really through the 90s, it stayed pretty solid, and they kind of started losing me when J. Michael Straczynski started joining the Spider Clan and that Ezekiel character and they broke up the marriage. They kind of told Howard Mackey that he had to break him up. I don't think he was, really keen on that idea. And then they put him back together for a few more years, probably just so they could hit us with one more day. But historically, I said, if anybody that is serious about the hobby really should read the Stan Lee written stories, the Ditko into Ramita. It's just classic stuff.
I think those are great, absolutely great runs, and there's so many good comics in there. And generally speaking, I have a lot of complaints about how they're reprinting and putting stuff into trades, but a lot of that Spider-Man run you can find. Like it is available in different formats if you need to.
Yeah, I at one point I owned issues 1 through 700 and all the annuals, and luckily you can get those stories again because we just bought some Spider-Mans this week, and I'm not going to say how much they were, but let's just say I'll never be able to afford them again. So luckily through the omnibuses and the Masterworks and the Epic collections, those stories are there, and they're never going to be as valuable. And this is something that that it sounds like a joke, but if you're my age, you get it. The remastered printing is easier on my eyes.
Yeah.
And when I read comics from the 60s, it's tough now. Gotta be honest.
Yeah. No, it's true. Now you mentioned 2 Marvel books, and we'll get into some of this other stuff. But in fact, I'll do this while we're just sitting here talking, because this is what I'm having today. I'm trying to figure out how to ship some of this to Joe. I'd said I'd send him some whiskey, and it turns out this company won't ship out of state. So now I'm having to do something else. But anyway, this is some good whiskey if you're into it. Eric, I can see you there. I need to do the face reveal and get done with all this, but I look kind of goofy. Are you drinking anything tonight?
I had to retire from alcohol consumption in 1992.
Oh no! Right before the image revolution. That was
because I don't remember 90 or 91.
Okay, well, fair enough. I can't blame you there, but man, that would have been handy with a lot of those image books that were coming out. You mentioned a bunch of Marvel books. What about Legion? Did you read a lot of Legion of Superheroes?
Yeah. I really like the 60s stuff because that was one of the rare DC titles that actually aimed a little higher than grade school.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of partial to the mid 70s era when they all looked like they got their clothes at a bondage shop.
Yes.
Dave Cochran must have had an interesting life outside of comics. Because I know he designed a lot of those, but that was a good fun era, and really I can find good in every era up until the most recent one.
Oh, there you go. That's good, and I'm sure it will come around again. My favorite Legion. So I loved a lot of different moments in the Legion history, the Great Darkness War, and before that. But I don't know why and it's weird. I know it's probably not everybody's would decide it's a favorite, but the relaunch, the 5 years later Legion, just hit me just right. I loved what they were doing during that period. This would be late 80s, I think. And Giffen was drawing that. It was just some, I thought that was very cool, very bold. And then a bunch of comics would rip it off in the future. Anyway, I love that time.
Well, I think the post-crisis DC, that first 5 or so years, and that Legion series you just referenced was part of that.
Yeah.
They were just doing everything right at that time.
Yeah. I liked, it's funny because there were so many good comics from, I would say 80, 86, 87 through about 92. That run there was some really good stuff in that time period. We got the Justice League kind of revamped during that era. We got a lot of really amazing Spider-Man stories, and I don't know. That was a great time, but
anyway. Yeah, Marvel was doing very well too. But it's just DC, because up to that point, there were writers that tried, like the Batman books in the first half of the 80s were very, very good. Conway and Doug Mensch really did a great job on that, on Batman Detective. Then you had Mike Barr on Batman the Outsiders, but then you'd also have Superman in Action, and with the exception of the Marv Wolfman run, it was the same as it was in 1974, which is the same as it was in 1964. So there was like, and you had the Titans and the Legion, but once the Crisis cleaned up all of the continuity, or they thought at the time, it was almost like everybody could say, okay, now we get to really show what we can do. And I said, Byrne Superman, and on and on and on. Grell's Green Arrow. There was just so much that it just you would have a harder time finding a bad book at DC than not. I mean, it's
true. I know. I think there was more to pick from, for sure. And one of the things I was going to do, actually, and I'll have you back on. We need to do it together. I'll probably want to grab Joe and a couple other people, and we'll do some kind of roundtable. I got sales figures. I mentioned this like a month or two ago for the 70s and 80s for comics, and it's kind of the holy grail where we can actually talk about what was selling very well, because during that time period you had a lot of returns. So that's, you had a lot of stuff going out, but you had a lot of stuff coming back. So to get to those true numbers, it's going to be a fascinating analysis. I want to have you in here when I talk about that. So we'll tease that for a future moment. But
all right,
that'll be good. I've now missed a ton of questions, so I was sitting here drinking when are the DC July solicits coming out? So there was this kind of brief word that kind of slid under the radar that DC, by some of the changes that they had made, the solicits would be out kind of 2 weeks later than they were before. So in the past, we always had DC would come out and then Marvel would come out a few days later the following week. And now that's flipped. Marvel's been coming out faster, and then DC trails it. So that seems to be what's going on. But I've mentioned this a few times to some other people. The Marvel is saying that with the Penguin Random House deal and other things, their solicits are likely to slip. So it feels like by October, so we're going to get back to DC and then Marvel. But it feels like everything kind of moved back 2 weeks. So there you go. Or maybe DC is printing no comics in July. One of those two things. Probably not that second one. Anyway.
But still charging $5 for them.
Still charging $5, and there's some people like Chris says, he's willing to pay $5 for a floppy, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that's shame. I mean, if you're happy with where your money's going, that's your business. I think it's just the price of comics and the constant relaunches and the volume, and we'll see it here in a minute when we go through the new comics that are coming out next week. Like at $5 a pop, it's tough to wrap that. I don't know. You've been collecting comics forever. This new $5 world, how does that sit with you?
I watched this. I remember having this reaction when they went up to 30 cents. But all kidding aside, I have more patience for smaller companies charging more.
Oh, for sure.
Because you realize some of these companies don't have. And this was before the big two were owned by giants. But,
right.
It's like, if that's what it takes to get this stuff out there, and we need, alternatives, even when the big two are going well. But it seems to me that companies backed by Disney and, AT&T really don't need to charge that much for a standard size book.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm way more tolerant. I think the indies and the smaller companies, I mean, they have thinner margins. They're just trying to build up the audience. It seems like Marvel and DC, as the big companies who really are trying to get to those that younger audience, that newer audience, all that kind of stuff, they're the ones who arguably should be driving the price down, not leading the way. I mean, we live in a world where a bunch of Image books and Spawn and other things are coming in significantly less than $5 now. Like that it feels very backwards to me.
Well, it seems like in some respects, the people that can afford these higher price points are the same people that the two companies seem to want to get rid of as a readership.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think Marvel and DC, almost more than anyone, really want that new audience. They want to not, and they say they want to not rely on collectors. They want to get to new people. And I don't think that's a bad idea, but then simultaneously you're charging a high price. You're putting out variants like you what are you doing? You're doing the opposite of what you say you want to do.
Yeah. When you think that you can get a video game for the price of a week's worth of comics and come home with a fairly small bag. Yeah. What are those what is that audience that you're courting? Where do you think they're going to spend that money?
Yeah, I agree, and I think especially if you don't have a locked in audience, you don't have a collector audience, you have somebody who's still trying to figure out how to spend their money. That's just tough. I've been in that position. I've been behind that counter, and it's like you see the person going $68 this week. And you can kind of just see it like they have a thought bubble in their head. It's like, I could go buy the new Assassin's Creed out or buy this stack of comics. And like, you hate seeing that thought process go down.
And it's very short-sighted for a comic book company to say, we don't want to rely on collectors, because here's something the collectors will do is they will grudgingly buy a book to keep a run going, or to keep, well, in Marvel's case, I know they relaunch every other issue, but you will keep buying it because you want every Amazing Spider-Man. If you chase that audience away, this new audience doesn't have the last 300 Spider-Man, so it's nothing for them to pass on it.
Yeah.
So that's just, it makes you wonder who is in the marketing department for these companies to think like that.
It seems very strange, and granted, there's other factors, of course. We have a bunch of customers, people on the outside, and there's stuff that are going on inside. But it is something that I think the people inside need to have empathy of understanding what's going on the outside. So it's but here's to the point. Here's new comics. This is coming out next week. So next Wednesday, Tuesday for DC, of course, but next Wednesday. And you'll notice right away in the bottom left there, this is page 1 of 7, which is always a bad sign. That is a sign we're going through 7 pages of this for next week. Now, granted, there's some good stuff. Erratic number 5. This comic's wrapping up this final issue. This has been an amazing series. I don't know, Breen, you've got to pick this up when it's in trade. I think you would like Erratic.
I've got the first 3 issues.
Okay, there you go.
That just, when I cut myself off, I missed one. If it's still there, I will probably finish the series because I was enjoying it. It was fun.
It's a good series. It's done well. It's done very well. And by the way, in about 2 weeks, thank you, Ash, by the way, Beck Star by our always collaborator, Joe Corallo, comes out in 2 or 3 weeks. I think it's the 1st or 2nd week of May. There you go. There's a diamond coat on the screen. Beck Star. It's a good book. I have read it. I haven't really figured out whether I should say anything or not, but I will do a review, in some way that I don't, spoil the whole thing. But I like it. It's a good book.
Do we know anything about the creator?
Yeah, he likes bisexual lighting, is what he says, and he makes very strange pitches. Is it? But it's a good book. It's a fun little book. It may not be for everybody, but it's a fun book. It's like space. I was talking to Joe a few days ago, and I was like, if I was summarizing this in 15 seconds, I would say it's, sci-fi adventure. It feels like kind of Indiana Jones in space to some extent. It's got that kind of feel to it. So I don't know. I enjoyed it. So for what it's worth, Joe has been in and out of the chat. So we'll see if he's here.
I guess I better get it. Otherwise my Monday mornings will become unbearable.
There you go. Yes. It's different. And check it out. At the very least, if you try it, you hate it, don't go for issue 2. It's fine. But Joe's made us laugh enough with his City of Bruce and You for Unrest and some of these things. We gotta support that. But yes, City of Beckstar. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Get Beckstar. There we go. Anyway, so yeah, page 1, Erratic. I definitely agree. I haven't heard. I asked Kari Andrews this question exactly, like, would we see more? He wasn't sure. He's obviously going to do it's Amazing Fantasy over at Marvel, which looks incredible. Have you seen the solicits for that, Eric?
I have. And I had someone recommending it to me, but I said I'm getting old and senile, and I forgot who it was, but it looked good.
I think Kari Andrews does an amazing job with this stuff, so I'm anxious to see what he does over there. I think it'll be great. So I can't wait to see that. How about on the second page, Berserker number 2? Did you get the first one? Are you into that?
I did not.
Okay, so you missed on all the violence.
But that's something. If I can change my mind anytime between now and the end of time,
yes,
and still get issue 1.
Wait a minute. You don't just make up your opinion and then keep it forever, no matter what new data comes your way. You actually change your mind. This is amazing.
I know. My favorite comic of all time was the Avengers last week.
Oh, okay. It's happening already. By the way, this is, I'll credit Joe with this. If you'll notice in these pages, one interesting thing when you look at the publishers, it's how many of them are named with an A. How many of the publishers start with an A, and then a decent amount are starting with a B. Do you know why that happens to be? There's a reason by that. Do you know?
Yeah, it goes back to the phone book. If you were looking for somebody to hire, you started at the beginning, so that you tended to go to the A's. That's why, if a friend of mine, his first job in law was at a company called Adams, Brooking and Stepner, and Adams had been dead for years before he got that job, but they kept his name at the front because that kept him at the front of the phone book. I don't know how viable that is in 2021, but that's the origins of that.
Yep. You're absolutely right. And it feels like it shouldn't be viable in 2021. I do know plenty of retailers who do their orders and then it's like a wrestling match. They get gassed after about 5 minutes of ordering. So it's like they get to the publishers that start with a C and they're done. So then they kind of speed up and get to the big ones. But yeah, isn't it? Don't you think it's perhaps an indication that maybe the whole ordering system and everything is broken if publishers are picking names that start with A to be successful? That just seems so screwed up. I don't know. Anyway, anything on this list? Well, again, you're not reading a lot of new comics, but there's some names maybe you recognize here. I mean, Jungle Fantasy Fauna #0. I mean,
yeah, I said there will be a couple things that will pop up that probably will catch my eye. And yes, Evil Black Cat, I can still read the screen. He's already nailed me once. So that's why I was laughing a second ago.
Mumbles is in here every time. Yeah.
All right. I always wanted my own troll, and I've got a good one.
Excellent. Yeah, I've got several. It's wonderful that's happening. Hey, over in DC world, we've got the first issue of Robin. What do you think? Do you think, Damian? What do you think about a Robin ongoing series? You've collected comics for a long time. Will this work?
It worked for Tim Drake for years. That was a fantastic series.
Well, there you go.
As far as Damian Wayne, it depends. If he's the Damian Wayne of the Super Sons, I think it can. If he's just that little snot that he became in Teen Titans where we last saw him, I think that could get old fairly quickly.
It feels like we're getting snot Robin.
Snot Robin.
Snot Robin. No, it does. Some of the preview pages indicate that it's going to be more of, I would say, the Teen Titans version of that character. But I mean, here's hoping. I'm just wondering, are we going to get some John Byrne covers, because Gleb loves that guy. So hopefully we get some of that. And then what do you think? There's a new issue of Action Comics coming out 10/30. But what did you think about the news that we're going to reboot Superman? We're going to relaunch it.
Are they going to go back to #1s again?
They are. Well, not for Action Comics, just Superman. And they're rebooting it as a #1, and they're kicking out the Kal-El, and it's going to be John Kent is Superman.
Yeah. Again, new Superman for this new audience they want, but every new relaunch is just as good of a jumping off point.
Yeah. I hope they've lined up the audience. I guess that's all I can say there. Yeah, Ruby Justice League is in there. Yes, thank you, Iron. There's also some Dynamite comics here, and everybody knows what that means. So, what do you think? How well do you think we got 4 Dynamite comics coming out next week, which means a pretty healthy selection of covers? What do you think? What do you think we're about to get on this next page here, Eric? Do you think Dynamite's going to come through for the perverts in the chat today?
10.
10?
10, partially to almost completely exposed.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. You're counting out a big week. Well, there you go. It is. We passed earlier. Jungle Fantasy. Like, what is up with this cover? Like, just. Yeah. There you go. What can you say? Comics, folks. There you go. I'm gonna keep doing this every time I get various people are like, there's nothing, they've stripped out all the women from comics. It's like, no sir, they're there. You just have to know where to go, and this is it. So I think that's a fold out cover for Jungle Fantasy. That is the full back cover is butt. So there you go. we placed poor Jeff away. All right, there you go, folks. I didn't know they were making a Betty Page comic. I guess I should have known that. And it's got an introduction by Frank Cho. So
yeah, so I think this is already the 3rd relaunch since she's been I think, yeah, Dynamite. I think this is the third.
Yeah, that's some stuff. Yes, it's a back cover there on Jungle Fantasy. There you have it. All right. Well, anyway, back to comics. The IDW is coming out with a hell of a week next week. Some reprints and some other things, but what we are you reading any IDW, or what do you like? This is a sea of licensed properties out of them. What do you think comes from that?
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of licensed property. So I mean, haven't really read much stuff like GI Joe and then some of the stuff like Sonic and things like that. I mean, I was already old when those were created, so I'd never really. I kind of missed the boat on that, and same with stuff like Transformers and Masters of the Universe and things like that. It's the only even GI Joe didn't start as a comic until I was probably in my 20s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a great comic though back then.
That's everybody says that it is, and I clearly missed the boat on that.
It sold some toys.
Sold some comics too.
Yeah, it's definitely sold some comics. What do you there? So what do you? How do you feel about crossovers? My Little Pony Transformers, is that something that what do you make of that?
Okay, crossovers, yes. That particular one, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, okay.
What are they gonna? The pony's gonna become like, one of the Transformers. Is that how it's gonna work, or how?
I mean, I will. I'll review it. I have to. I mean, I'm curious. I'm curious how you tie those properties together. It doesn't seem like that would be a good synergy book. But there you have it. Yeah.
I've always found that whole thing a little unsettling.
Well, yeah, you've seen there's just too many bronies out there. Yeah. You're not fooling us, Jeff. I know you were around for the cheesecake there. How about over here? Image got a lot of things. Again, page 5 of 7. It's nightmares. By the way, when we get to the summary at the end, it's just going to bring it home how insane next week is. But Cross. By the way, what is Savage Dragon punching there with poor Witchblade? Like that's a strangely Eric Larson's put that together very. Anyway. Speaking of crossovers, do you like this idea of having all the comic characters in one place?
If it's done well, I've always liked good crossovers, whether they're within one company or when companies would cross over back when like Marvel and DC were getting along well enough to do that. I mean, I remember Marvel versus DC, even though it was the premise was cheesy when they let the fans vote, so that gave us some winners that really didn't make sense. But and then but the Justice League Avengers crossover in the early 2000s,
yeah,
I thought that was as good a book as I read in many a year.
Yeah, I miss. Do you think the industry would, if right now somehow all the politics and by politics I mean the internal kind of issues between Disney and Warner Media and everything else, it could all be put aside and we could get a big Marvel DC crossover? How would it do if they did that today? Do you think?
I honestly don't know. I don't know if it would become a "be careful what you wish for" type of thing.
That's true.
I don't know. It's there are some talented people working at both companies still.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I don't know if they one of the things that made these crossovers work so well was these guys were not only good writers, they were longtime fans. And if you're a longtime fan, you can slip right into some other company's characters and know how they're supposed to be written.
For sure.
But if you get this like a hot young writer that might be, he's written a certain book, but he doesn't really know much about the other characters, it might not go as well. So I just don't know if there's enough longtime writers. I mean, they're still out there, but I don't know if they would be given a chance to do something like this. If we were going to get like a Marvel DC crossover, I would want them to dust off the Roger Sterns of the world, and Dan Jurgens, people that have been around forever and a day to do them, or Jerry Conway, guys like that. But I don't know. I say, as far as like the lesser known companies, heck, you can't. You go into an LCS on any given Wednesday without seeing Vampirella crossing over with somebody.
That's true.
Like this week, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, we can go back if you'd like. I can put those screens back up again. But no, it feels like if you were to do a crossover, I mean, first of all, I think the legalities would never allow it at this point. But I'd want to do what you say. Like get like a Jerry Conway. This is where you go to a John Byrne in isolation and say, let's have you make something. That's I don't know. There's lots of good stuff I think that could be done, but you'd have to get the right people to do it who can, because not only do you have to respect two properties, but you can't have like one just completely bitch out the other. There's got to be some balance there.
Well, do you mind if I ask a question?
Of course.
Because we have a professional writer in the chat.
We do. Yes.
Mr. Thorne, if this were something that could be done in today's climate, would you be interested in taking part in it?
Yeah, let us know there. I should have had Jeff just on, but yeah, would be, because I think Jeff is one of the people we've seen him on before with different shows. He is somebody who knows his history. Brandon here is saying, Walton Weezy, Roger Stern writes, and John Byrne draws. Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of people out there who could make this work, but I do think you'd have to have somebody who could get the right balance and crossover, for all of its, what it's hyping and pretending to be. It is a story about these new characters. There's kind of guest appearances by some of these other characters, but it's really not. It's not like, this cover is misleading. I don't think, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think Savage Dragon or Witchblade have shown up in this book. It's just for the cover. But anyway, Jeff says, "Please God, no." But I'm not sure if he's talking about the butts or this idea. But yeah, let us know. I mean, Jeff, would you do a crossover, and what would that look like? Or maybe that's a bigger question than for the chat. But while we're thinking about that, how about over here with Marvel? You mentioned Spider-Man. Surely there's a Spider-Man book of some sort next week. But we are getting X-Men Legends, which will reunite Walton Weezy. That's got to be pretty cool, right? You read this run of X Factor.
Oh yeah, I may actually come out of retirement for that.
Mm-hmm. I think 2 issues. I like this approach. I like this idea of. If you're a fan of if you're a fan of X-Men, but you don't like the current direction and what they're doing with it, and I know there's a handful of people out there, this idea of X-Men Legends, something that can kind of sit on the side and be done with classic creators. I mean, why, if you're a comic company, why wouldn't you do that? This just seems like easy money.
Oh yeah, I recently rediscovered the X-Men Forever series from about 12 or 13 years ago. And I'd forgotten how much I liked those. Mm-hmm. And so I mean, anything that gets close to, my era, I think I'd be in for. So I think I did look through number 1. I didn't, some of the characters weren't the ones that I was as familiar with, because it got to at the height of the X-Men, popularity, the late 80s, early 90s. I said, I was off doing other things, and then, attempting to drink myself into oblivion. So there are characters that I'm not really that familiar with. So the issue 1 didn't grab me, but that cover right there, it one of those wants to come home with me.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, the way Walt would draw Apocalypse too. I mean, it was sinister, the smile, the whole thing. I really enjoyed that, and they did start off Legends. I liked it was Nacinta and Booth. I liked the story, but it was Adam X. It was tying up a loose thread, but it wasn't probably what a lot of people really remember when it comes to some of this stuff. And this run with Walton Weezy on X Factor is pretty legendary, I think. And then they're going to roll right into Peter David doing a run during his X Factor piece. Ash is saying here that they've established that it doesn't really matter And that's true to some extent. The stories are largely one shots. They're supposed to reveal new things, but it's definitely a nostalgia point. Don't get me wrong. I would love it if this was like, if they said, we're going to put Walton Weezy on a X Factor book and give him 3 years to tell a story, that would be the best. But I'll take what I can get. I'll like,
yeah. At this point, I will take something that just makes me enjoy reading an X-Men book.
mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to see it. Meanwhile, so Jeff is giving you your answer. So he's into it. He said he'd be happy to do it, love to do it, elevate both properties, and both fan bases would be served. Comics elevated, Titans X-Men, JLA Avengers. What else we got? Doctor Strange Sandman. That's an interesting pairing. I'd be very interested to see that. Yeah, a lot of good stuff here. Fantastic Four, terrific. That's an interesting one. So something where you take an existing property, the Fantastic Four have been around for a while, terrific, something relatively new that DC is doing, and use that to kind of help both properties along. I like it. So anyway, I hope there's no way they will do it, but it's a nice idea.
No, I honestly think that you could probably get AT&T on board with it. But I don't think the mouse is having any of it. Mm-hmm. They don't like to share.
I can't even imagine how. I mean, just the legalities around it would be so terribly painful. But yeah, look at this: Legion, superheroes versus Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, absolutely. But it's tough. And even to this question, do I think there's any respect to building canon? In a lot of cases, I heard this, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, that some of the editorial direction for the ongoing books, and I don't know if Jeff's seen this with Green Lantern, I would guess no, based on what he's doing. But this, in fairness, I was hearing this from a Marvel editor, was saying that, there's a downplaying of canon, that history and building canon and building kind of bigger mythology is almost discouraged, because we want books that are, easy to start, easy to end. And so there's almost a downplaying of some of that, which, again, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. It sounds terrible, but we'll get the last one out here, and then we'll stop torturing poor Eric with new books. Here we go.
No, this is fun, but I'm going to answer Bob's question real quick.
Yeah, please.
Probably my favorite non-Marvel and DC books are a lot of the first books, but I don't know that you could call Nexus a superhero per se. But I would probably say maybe the Thunder Agents from the Tower comics in the 60s.
Okay. Nice. Very, very nice. I should put up that question if I can. These things fly by. We got a lot of people in the chat with it. By the way, if you're bored and you would like to hit then that's great. It helps some level of algorithm. YouTube's been really weird. I wanted to put up some screenshots, but they have blocked or held suspended comments that are just the weirdest comments, things that have no dirty language in it, nothing bad at all. Just randomly they pop in there. So if that's happened to you, or you've seen one of your comments eaten, it's happening to everyone. I was in there, I don't know, yesterday, and Sean Gordon Murphy had some comments in there. Just he's saying nothing bad, but they were off in the held. I don't know what YouTube is doing. It's a terrible product. So I'll just leave it with that. All right, last page. So 7 of 7. Anything on here? I mean, is Xenoscope? They're still putting their stuff in there.
Yeah, I thought they were going to quarterlies, but it looks like they've got some things that they need to wrap up first. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what I've noticed through all 7 pages, and this is something that someone who has been reading comics for 45 years. All the low numbers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I actually saw a video today about the Cult of Dracula.
Yeah.
Which I had no idea, existed. But, and it looked like a good story, but I saw a lot of the art from it, and the art really didn't measure up to the story. So I don't know. It's just, I do think it's troubling for the industry when everything is either a miniseries or relaunched after just a handful of issues.
I mean, on this page, we have, by my count, 2 comics that are in double digits. 2. and the highest is Xenoscope's Grim Fairy Tales 48, but everything else is
which should be 170 something because they relaunched after 125.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, in the future, all comics will be number ones. That's right. That's right. Which, actually, to put a point on it, there we go. So to sum it up, 118 comics coming out next week. We got 34 publishers in the mix, which is a lot. And there are 38, which is a little bit more than a quarter, are number one issues. So 38 number one issues in 1 week is pretty crazy.
I tell you what,
I don't know. I do this every time, and I'm always like, it should be just boring at this point, but it's like it's still these are the hard numbers, and it still feels like a lot of it just feels like a lot. And I don't know. I'm sympathetic. There's right now, if you're in any kind of retailer channels over at Facebook and other places, they're always talking about how do they promote, how do they get people to find some of this stuff, and a lot of people just opting out. It's like I feels like this is the big elephant in the room. 118 comics in a week, not counting OGNs, trades, stuff from Japan, stuff from Europe. Yikes.
Yeah, and the problem again is once these books get off of the new shelf and go to the 6 week, they have a shot from the 6 week, but once they get from the 6 week to back issues, it's so hard to get them out of there again, short of marking them down and putting them in a dollar bin, because most retailers don't order a whole lot of copies because there's so much of them. If you decide with issue 4, hey, I didn't notice this before. This looks really good. Where's 1, 2, and 3? Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, true.
So you go, well, then I guess I don't need 4 or 5. I'll just wait for the trade. Trade comes out, you may forget it again and move on to something else. So much stuff just gets lost in the weeds. And then from a retailer, I mean, it's to the point now where if you work in a comic shop, you need a PhD to file this stuff.
Oh yeah,
because with like Marvel, for an example, like there's been so many relaunches of X books that you can't the odds of going to a shop and finding them in the proper order, even if they have them, it's not a large percentage, and then you just, like I said, that leads to a lot of people just throwing up their hands and moving on.
Unfortunately, the problem is it benefits the big two because like we talked about at the beginning, people, the retailers will go to Marvel, go to DC, put most of their attention there, then a little bit of time to Boom and Image and IDW and the other retailer or the publishers they recognize, and then the interest kind of wanders off from there. But the challenge is a lot of the big two are kind of counting on some of the smaller indies to bring in new readers who are going to see new things and then eventually make their way into the mainstream. That happened very successfully in the 70s and 80s, especially the 80s. But now it's 118 comics. We were, for the month of April, I think just over 410 comics for the month. And again, not counting stuff, not counting manga, not counting Europe, not counting OGNs, not counting trades. That's a lot.
If you take that 118, factor in variant covers, if a store ordered every cover of all 118 of those books, how many books are we talking, you think?
Oh, I mean, you're in the thousands of territory. I mean, Dynamite puts out variant covers with, they label them by letters. So you have variant cover, A, B, and C, and they go to double letters. So you get like A, B, A, C, A, D. I mean, you're talking about thousands of comics. You're well over 1,000, probably getting close to 2 with the variants that they put out. And it's hard mentally to wrap your head around it. That's why some shops have tried point of sale systems and other pieces of software to kind of help them out with how they do it. But it's not, none of that's going to actually work very well. Anyway, it's tough. But here, happier thing. We'll go here. All right. I want to try this with you. So who did it better? See what you think about this, Eric. We'll take something that came out last week, something from the past. Fortunately, because they relaunch everything, we can actually do it this way. So here we've got Champions from 1975, Champions number 6 there.
Mm-hmm.
And we got Champions number 6 from 2021, just happened last week. What did you read? First of all, did you read the Champions back then?
Yes.
You like that book?
I was a big fan of that book. I think, Tony Isabella.
Yeah.
This was the best to me. This was his peak period because he had this at Marvel and Black Lightning at DC.
Oh yeah.
Now, admittedly, Black Lightning was better, but
yes.
Champions was. I mean, you got a couple of former X-Men. You got Hercules and Black Widow. You got Ghost Rider, because Stan insisted that one of the members had to have their own title. That's how we got Ghost Rider on a team that kind of didn't fit, but Tony made it work. And this unfortunately only lasted 17 issues, but they packed in an awful lot in those issues. And this was a fun series.
It's what I was commenting. I read the New Champions, and the dialogue in the New Champions, I think, is pretty tough at various times. And this particular panel, they brought the fight to us, to a teenager's ultimate battleground, the internet. I don't know what to make of that line, but as I'm putting this up here, I'm like, I'm going to grab something from Champions number 6, and Champions number 6 gives us this. Featuring Rampage, the recession-born supervillain who could be you. What? It feels like they're both kind of absurd here.
No.
I've stunned Breen into silence.
Well, I thought I had an issue of Champions in my box here. I was going to pull it out and start reading it. But...
Yeah, nice. I like how the Angel's just kind of hanging out there. I remember this era of Angel. This was but I don't know. Anyway. Well, let's try another one. Okay, you ready? This one's a little bit less further back. All right. So we got again from this week. We got Justice League number 60 from 2021, and this time we picked. There's technically a couple Justice Leagues, but here's the one from 92. So first of all, did you read this? Are you reading the current Justice League by Brian Michael Bendis, David Marquez?
No.
Okay. How about the DeMatteis Giffen run of this Justice League?
It's in my probably top 5 to 10 of all-time favorite runs.
Yeah.
You have no idea how bent out of shape I was when they did the breakdown storyline, when I guess DC had decided that. Now, you probably have sales charts to back up why they did it, but it seemed to me like they'd had enough of the tomfoolery and said, make it serious again. And, that was just like, it was like I'm the baby and someone took the candy away from me.
I agree. So I loved that run of Justice League. It was polarizing, though. It was weird. There were definitely people who did not like the humor. They didn't understand why. You've got Blue Beetle, Booster Gold, Fire and Ice hanging out, and just like, where's the star power? I really like this run, but definitely there's some people who hated it. You are right. They did move away after the breakdowns storyline for sales, because I think Justice League, and I'll look when we get a moment here, and I'm not drinking, but I think that it slipped under 75,000. In sales. So it was they needed to do something dramatic because it was under 75,000. And so they decided to bring back a more star powered team.
But for all the people that wondered why we didn't have that star powered team from the beginning on the Bwahaha era.
Yeah.
Because we'd just come out of Justice League Detroit. But prior to that, you did have all the big characters until Batman left to do the Batman the Outsiders book, but people got tired of that iteration as well. That's how we got Justice League Detroit. That didn't catch on, so when they figured the Crisis was an opportunity to clean the slate and do something radically different, and we got the introduction in the last issue of Legends, which, springboarded into their own title, which soon became 2 titles. So it worked, at least initially, but I guess at some point it just ran its course to the readership at large. I was very sorry to see it go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked I liked what it did for characters, and I do think if you were in hindsight, if you're looking at this, and we're looking at Martian Manhunter, I think this series actually did a lot for that character, even though he was established. I still think it helped elevate him. Guy Gardner, I think, got a lot of depth during this. Fire and Ice, Blue Beetle, Booster Gold. I mean, these characters were all B characters. And so I thought it was an interesting approach that, the main characters, your Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, etc., they all had their own books. And so the idea was, can we elevate kind of the B characters? And they did. I mean, the comic did hover between like 150 and 75K. And people in the chat are saying 75K is abysmal. I mean, sort of. Again, this is where it gets back to the returns. So this is 75K after the returns. And there were plenty of books that were below 75K when the returns had come in. So this was kind of middle ground. But for DC, having your Justice League book sell in that range was a no-go. And that's why they pushed the eject button and they put on a bigger star power team. But it didn't help it terribly. I mean, this is where I'll show the numbers, but it's not like it made it tremendously better. And that was
they took away, they kind of downplayed the humor of the B characters. But I remember a character that got a big push after that was a character called Bloodwind, who, people didn't know either. And so and there were some other characters, but I remember that era, and Dan Jurgens was writing it, and he did fine. But I've said, but the Justice League has always been about introducing new characters. Like I said, and there were ones in these with, Booster and Beetle. I said, Bloodwind after that, and there was, the Dr. Light character from the, Bwahaha era. But you notice they did hedge their bets and place Batman on this team.
Yeah. Yeah.
If nothing else, to give, it's almost like comic relief for just how exasperated he was by just the absurdities surrounding him, with really only Dr. Fate and, even Martian Manhunter. Remember, he developed an addiction to Oreo cookies.
Yep. I don't know. I liked, there's some good Batman stories going on at the time, but I mean, this series, if you've read this before, this run, I mean, there's moments in here that I think stick with you for forever. Like this, Guy Gardner running his mouth over several issues, and then finally Batman just punching him and knocking him out with one punch. As like, people talked about that for years, if not decades after that.
The Black Canary panel.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. One punch. I missed it. And then you see, I'm going to be sick. But the thing about this run also was even though it was, mostly played for laughs, you really developed, you came to care about these characters. And that's why, Countdown, I think it was called Countdown to Infinite Crisis, the first book where Max Lord shot Beetle in the head. Yeah. When you realize that was the last nail in the coffin of that era of DC, why that, resonated, why that got such a reaction, but whether it was positive or negative. I had a friend of mine that had been reading comics as long as I have. That made him quit.
It did, and that's I was trying to address that in a video, I think earlier today or yesterday, whenever it was posted. YouTube taught me a deadly lesson, by the way, that if you post up all the videos in advance, and I did, I put out 2 weeks worth of videos, and I just got them all scheduled out. But the problem is YouTube will stop promoting them completely after like 4 days. They'll just nuke you. So I saw the viewership just drop right on the floor. But I think there's moments like what you're talking about where I don't know if the writers, the editors, the publishers really realize it, but they're doing something that is a moment that is hard for people to come back from. It's a one-way trip on the storyline. And I think that was one of them, that Max Lord shooting Blue Beetle was one of those that it was meant to be kind of a shocking moment, but instead it just it hurt people badly.
Well, it didn't help that at the right around the same time, I think it was JLA Classified was doing a 6-issue revival of the Bwahaha Justice League. So
Yeah.
you got to see the Max Lord that we loved from almost 20 years ago. At the same time, we were seeing him brutally murder one of his best friends.
Yeah, it was that, I don't know if tone deaf is the right word, but it was just, there's something that just blew up, and you see these moments every now and then that just feel so tonally wrong that people can't wrap their head around it. And I know the answer is always like, it's just comics, who cares? But it's like, comic fans, customers will put up with a lot. I mean, like that's the dirty secret, but like everybody has had a run in a comic that they haven't liked, or the price went up and they didn't like it, or the creative team got bounced for whatever reason or something. Like, the comic fans have a long history of disappointment, but you have to work at it to really isolate them, I think.
One thing that, all these years, what I finally learned to do was I referenced the Marvel period between House of M through Siege.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always talking about how good I thought it was. Now, I say that based on the ideas for the stories. Now, the heroes fighting heroes hadn't been done to death yet. It has since been, but it just taken as like a piece of comic book history. If you don't think too much about what came before it or what came after it, and just appreciate it for what it was, there were a lot of really good story ideas, even if characters were written out of character. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't have its flaws,
Mm-hmm.
and the worst disservice ever done to a character was done to Spider-Man in that time. Whether it was One More Day or Bendis treating him like the team mascot, but and over at DC, Max shooting Blue Beetle was horrific. And so was, the rape storyline, Gene Loring murdering Sue Dibney. But if you just look at that era, just on its own, there was some incredible stuff going on in those eras that I don't think comics have come close to replicating since.
Mm-hmm.
Myself personally, I'd rather go back farther and read stuff that, like the Kree Skrull War or something like that. It's more fun. But I said creatively, I thought both companies were doing really well in from like 2004 to 2010. But I said there were some things that like I said, when a guy that's been reading for 30 something years quits on a dime because that was his last straw.
Yeah.
He said, well, you should have hung around for another year, and they did the same thing to Captain America.
No, I mean, agreed. It's interesting. Like some people are saying in the chat, and yes, we could be previewing Jungle Fantasy right now, but it'd be a very different channel. If I'd lose all my whiskey sponsorships, is the problem. But as I think Jamie says it really well here. Yeah, I mean, people are jaded, they're frustrated, but I mean, and this is maybe important, I think, for everybody to pay attention to, both the publishers and creatives on that side. Not that it's two sides, but the fans as well. Is even when people are complaining, here they show up, they're engaged, they'll pay quite high prices, they'll talk about things, they're here on this channel or many other channels. Like, comic fans want to be around, they want to buy comics, they want to read comics, they definitely want to be around. It's there's the vast majority of them are happy to be here. And yes, of course I want free whiskey. Who doesn't want free whiskey? Come on.
Well, what other hobbies are there out there that you can, like I said, I'm not buying anything from the big two right now, but I'm literally doing something comics related almost all the time now, whether it's back issues. It's my job now. But it's just, I said, the industry, the hobby is bigger than next week's new comics.
Yeah,
I should write that down. That was rather pithy.
That is good. That's a slogan you got there. I thought I wanted to do this because you mentioned, and yes, to the people in the chat, we have some more recent stuff here. No, we're not at the end of the stream. Far from it. The best. Well, you said you're reading a lot of 70s comics right now.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, they're thinking, what do I, where do I begin? If I want to go and I want to read something from the 70s, where do you point them at?
On this board?
No,
Holy
just in general. This board, by the way, is interesting because we grabbed what are the most memorable, the most talked about comics or runs during the 70s. I'm not sure I completely agree with this board, but this is what the internet had decided. There are some definite classics on here, but where would you aim people like, who, and there's also this perception where you're like, I can't go to the 70s. That's old people comics. I want to read something more modern, but I mean, several of these comics during this period, you wouldn't know you're reading an old comic.
No, it's, well, just to take some of the things on this board, the, Iron Man, I believe that's, I can't see what issue that is.
It was still only 35 cents. Let's see, it's 126, I believe, or 116.
Okay. Yeah, that was right before his first bout with alcoholism, the Demon in a Bottle story. Yeah, in that Avengers story, Hank Pym had lost his mind and he retreated into his Ant-Man personality, fought the Avengers, and we found out that Ultron had scrambled his brains. And that was part of one of the best runs. I mean, that shooter era of Avengers is hard to match. You've got the relaunch of Green Lantern, Green Arrow there, which O'Neill and Grell this time. The first Ra's al Ghul, again, that part of the initial Ra's al Ghul storyline that was that issue, and then 3 issues in the 240s, which was really put Batman back to being Batman and kind of like took the last bit of the Adam West series out of the character. Obviously, you don't need me to tell you about Giant Size X-Men. I mean, that started
for sure. That's
revolution in comics. That Spider-Man, arguably one of the best 2-issue arcs in comics history. So and then obviously Captain Marvel fighting Thanos back before Thanos wasn't one of 5 villains that writers that get paychecks from Marvel could name.
Yeah, that's true.
It's but as far as where to direct kids, like I said, Claremont. Well, Len Wein, Chris Claremont, X-Men. That everybody should read that. And then, if you say 70s comics or old man comics, do those people feel the same way about the 80s when arguably, sure. The best runs in Marvel history all took place other than the X-Men, which had already started? I mean, it's, I said, Miller's Daredevil, Simonson's Thor, Byrne's X-Men, O'Neill's Iron Man, Claremont's X-Men. I said, there's 5 good places to start.
And I think in general, this stuff, it's easy to start with a lot of these. I mean, there are trades, there are omnibuses, there's digital readers, there's places you can go, but there's some good runs. And I mean, the nice part about it is if you start with one of these, you are setting yourself up for, in some cases, hundreds of issues. So you're going to consume a lot of time in the Netflix binge era. There's a lot of good stuff here. But Jasper Plan 9 points out, great point. Yeah, Michael Turner, very, very sad. Just left us way too soon. And phenomenal talent, did amazing work, and we'll always absolutely miss Michael Turner, who was just, and many others. Comics have lost some pretty major people over the last 5 years. It's very sad. So,
but Kyle has provided a lighter note.
Yeah, there you go. I know people. The night Gwen Stacy died. Yeah. There you go. And it's interesting. Cerebus. What is your take on Cerebus? It is true. It started as a parody. It got some critical acclaim, and it's definitely today. If you go into a shop and you're looking for Cerebus, you're going to get maybe a weird look from the retailer at this point.
I marked down a couple hundred issues of Cerebus today.
Okay.
It's been clinically dead. Today's comic book reader has wouldn't know Cerebus the Aardvark from the Ant and the Aardvark.
Right.
The original character, yeah, it was huge, 40 years ago. But I think, and it had its fans, no question. I was never one of them. I was more of a flaming carrot kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the reasons why it got as big as it did was kind of the book that you ever seen, like when the lady with the SUV wants to make sure that you can see her, $6 latte in her hand when she's driving. Same thing with Cerebus. That's where all the people that thought that made them look cooler if they were buying it.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
And then then like I said, then the luster wore off. And I said, now, I mean, when I went through there, they had been repriced about 7 years ago, and nothing had been touched in that time. And the guy told me he had marked them down from where they hadn't been touched for like 10 years prior to that.
Yeah. I agree. It's a lot of reasons. Yeah, and that's a whole kind of video in itself of what the hell happened. But anyway, it's here we'll go to a different. All right, now Eric, have you seen this bit here, intentional or not? Have you seen this?
I don't know that I have.
Okay, we've done this before. So what I've got to do here is I want to show you a panel. It's a real panel. It's not edited. I haven't gone through and changed the text around. And I want you to just give me your take, and certainly the people in the chat. Is this panel, was the artist or the writer doing a joke on somebody, or was it intentional, or was it unintentional comedy that came out of it? Okay.
All right.
We'll give it a shot. Here we go. All right. Here's our first panel. This one's kind of a tame one here. The Amazons are fighting / training. But the artist took some liberties with some of the fighting. What do you think? Was there somebody making a little joke here, or was this what makes you what do you take with this?
Oh, without a doubt. One of the things that artists would do, especially during the years where the code was strictly enforced, they kind of came up with the same things to slip by the censors that, say, directors would do when the Hays Code was all powerful. So yeah, absolutely. This is, like the one in the middle.
Yeah.
If a head was a little
look
lower.
Like preparation does not look like preparation for war. Like
it does not.
This is a very strange war that's going on if they're going to fight it this way. They may win, but
I'm thinking this poor girl doing the dialogue is only doing that because they ran out of partners.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, gee. Look at the one in the back there that's got, well, both of them kind of standing up have got their legs scissored. Yeah. There's a lot of things going on in this panel. So okay, the chat also believes this is legit. So this was intentional that went on here, but this should have been Wonder Woman 84. I'm sure it was. I'm sure there's some movies, parodies that have been done of Wonder Woman 84. The Axel Braun version, perhaps. But anyway, all right. You ready for the next one? We've got 3 of these. You ready for the next one? All right. Here we go. All right. Here's some dialogue. What about this? Good classic Flash. What do you think about the wording here?
Unintentional.
You think unintentional? Okay.
Yeah.
You're going time period.
I don't have any context, but I'm guessing somebody either slipped him something. And now I know this was before Flashes needed to eat because they burned so many calories. But yeah, I'm going to give this the benefit of the innocence doubt.
Okay, you're going innocent. It is kind of weird that he'd want nuts specifically. Like, why nuts? I mean, why not?
Okay, now again, going back to the era, almost everybody spent their time bellying up to the bar. What was sitting on every bar in America?
Okay, all right. I see where you're going with this. Yeah. So he's maybe he's drunk.
Damn it, Yule.
Yeah. Oh no. Now it was Alan Scott. Yeah. Yeah. I see what you did there. But who, in fairness, who has not? Yeah, see, somebody else said the same thing. Who hasn't wanted to eat hundreds of nuts at some point? All right. Okay, last one. Let's see what we got. But we're 1-1. One intentional, one not. How about this? This is just a panel. Again, what do you go for this?
Wow, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I can't even fake one for this.
This could go a number of directions. Now, granted, context matters, but that's the whole point of this bit is we're taking these kind of out of context a little bit. But Archie does have a long history of the artist. I don't know. I think the wrestling term would be going into business for themselves, where they would do these intentional kind of sight gags. There was the one I think I showed a couple weeks ago where the girls are like, now let's go stripping. And another one where they like their faces had been kind of splattered with cream pies. They're like, I can't believe we did that. But luckily only the movie producer will have seen it. And it's like,
oh God, do you remember the cover when Archie's got something and says, but Archie just beat them all off.
Yeah. Yes.
It's dumb. Now this would have been easier to make that connection if it had been almost any other character other than Jughead.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, Jughead was always that guy who was never interested in girls, and unless all he cared about was his next hamburger. So maybe Jamie's right. Yeah, I said that's because they definitely did have some fun.
Yeah,
because there were some writers artists that would that were almost like good girl artists. I mean, like Harry Lucy.
Yeah,
and he would try to get away with as much as he could. With his art. So, yeah, I'm going to change my vote from non-committal to intentional.
Okay, there you go. This is I like this bit. I do have hundreds of these. There are hundreds of these panels, and you, Iron, I appreciate that. I like how you tied it back to the first one, just like Amazon's train. Jughead's just getting ready for war. That's what's going on. Yeah. There are a lot in the history of Archie. It is funny how many times they get their shower scenes or mud wrestling or there's just an amazing amount of shenanigans that go on to that book. But for something that's sold on the supermarket shelf for kids, it is amazing how much they get away with. But anyway, there we go. By the way, before we go into some of the old comics, no, we're not at the end of the stream, but just as I put out some of those, and yes, some are more modern, and we'll keep talking here with Eric. Two things. First, if you're liking it, give it a thumbs up. That would be appreciated. But more importantly, if anyone has any suggestions, we do these Friday night. But if there's a better night, if you'd rather have this on a Thursday or a Monday or some other time period, I'm continuing to look to do something that is good for everybody. So if you have any suggestions for things you'd like to see or times when this is on or any of that kind of stuff, go for it. Just in terms of what's coming up on the channel, we have some interviews. We're off starting to film and tape, some with Joe, some without. We got some retrospectives coming up. I've got sales figures for, I know Super Sons is coming up, I think, quick. So we'll do the sales analysis of Super Sons, and somebody wanted Iceman for reasons I don't quite understand, but we have that one. And a few others that are in the near future. And I'm talking with some other people about stuff, and I'm posting art to Instagram. There's stuff everywhere. So anyway.
Before we do the other thing, can you excuse me for 1 second?
Oh, 100%.
All right, just a sec.
Oh, he's just leaving. Okay. I thought he wanted to say something very, very nice. But I mean, Friday is good, but if anybody has any other suggestions, it's good. Or if we want to do this more frequently in a smaller time period, happy to do that too. I'm going to be kind of moving that around a little bit. And hopefully, as the world opens up, I'm going to get injected with microchips on Sunday. So that's a happy day. And then I'm going to be traveling. Hopefully, I need to travel internationally. It's just hard to do right now. So hopefully we can get on that. So lots of different things. Yeah. Thanks, Mumbles. Mumbles never change. And if you're watching this, I know a couple of people are watching this on Facebook. It is streaming on YouTube. It's streaming on Facebook. Once this is all done, I'll post it up and put it in the podcast. So if you're seeing this later, you can watch it without ads and YouTube's nonsense. And yes, Joe and I are definitely getting another video planned with some more pitches that is coming in very soon. We're going to run that bit completely into the ground. So that is happening. Yes, I'm getting the jab is what's going on. All right, let's see. What else do we have? I'll flip it. Okay, yeah, we'll just wait for Eric to get back for you. I'll go into this. We got a bunch of comics, modern and old, here of things that are happening. Jamie's asking, is that fruit basket interview coming up? Yes. Translating that, it's slow but surely, that is coming, and that'll be great. That's something that's in the can, and it will definitely be coming up soon. And it's weird. I'm just going to warn you, it's very, very weird. Can I announce Comic Cons? Yes, absolutely. That's a good suggestion. I'll be getting those. Putting those in, in up and in and whatever I was saying there. We do have Eric back. I just went to the screen, Eric, so no worries. But answering some questions in the chat. Any suggestions anybody has, like always, bring them in. And I know there's a number of people who have sent me comics to review and lots of stuff. But on this day in the past, we had these comics. How about this stuff? What do you think? This week in April, in years past, did you ever read Star Wars, by the way?
At the very beginning of the Marvel run in '77.
Okay.
The movie, it actually, I think it even beat the movie out by a couple of issues.
Yeah.
And I read it for about the first year or so, but when I sold a collection very early, and then when I went back, I didn't keep buying Star Wars. So really, I only read like first dozen or so.
This Savage Tales, I'm trying to find the date for. By the way, some people are noting that on it says June. So what the hell? Why are we showing it for April? It's because those months were garbage back then. I promise it did come out. I had the same thought. I put this cover and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't for April. And then I went and I'm like, the place that helps me out here, the Spinner Rack on Twitter, you should definitely follow them. They put a lot of stuff up. Like, they've got it wrong. But sure enough, no, this is it did come out this week. It's just, for whatever reason, they put June on the cover.
Well, it was so it could stay on the newsstands longer.
Oh, there you go. That's an actual legitimate answer. I'm just a big idiot. So there you have it. I think this was from 1971 is the idea. Nope, maybe not. I don't know. There were a couple different comics letter to this. But this era of Star Wars was also where the characters are getting a little sluttier. This was right before they canceled it for some reason. But there you have it.
Wasn't that when they co-opted the cover with Dynamite?
Yes, exactly. That's right. This was the precursor, the prequel to Dynamite. And of course, on X Factor that is early Apocalypse. He used to look like that. So
that's right, kids. That issue is worth more than the rest of the series.
Yes, that's true. That's a very, very good issue if you have it in good shape. This was the first full appearance of Apocalypse. Is that right? I mean, because he'd been in the shadows, I think, in the previous issue.
I think he popped up in the last page of issue 5, and then because that one 5 carries a little bit of value, 6 is pushing $100 now, and probably, I'm sure, more so if it's graded. But it's 6 is the first full appearance. And no, kids, that page in Marvel Age does not count.
No,
for all you speculators out there.
How about what do you say about this? So Red Skull or Punchline, which is the more dangerous podcaster, would you say?
Oh gosh, I'm going to go with Punchline because she was able to mobilize her fan base, and we don't know yet if the Red Skull is going to be able to do the same.
A good point. Yeah, we haven't seen. I mean, he already had an army, so we actually haven't seen him do really anything with that. With that podcast. I have to believe that, like, with Punchline, you notice at least they had her in her videos look kind of sad, and she'd take off some of the makeup and hidden the guns and the knives, and she's doing that. But the Red Skull's just like banging on a table with a red skull. Like, I just, that's not going to work. And plus, I think female podcaster showing lots of cleavage is going to beat Red Skull Angry Man any day of the week. That's why I keep hiding my face. Yeah. Anyway, there we go. So DC, how about this? Titans, we got Dark Knight Returns. What am I saying? Yeah, this is Dark Knight, Frank Miller, Klaus Johnson. What do you think? And there's Hitler. Oh God, there's Hitler. I didn't notice that when I first put this on there. We've got Adventures of the Outsider with Ghost Hitler.
Yeah. Well, what a game changer that Batman series was.
Yes, it was.
I mean, it is you. I mean, I said it. Just the amount of traffic that generated in shops, during that the time when those 4 issues would come out. I said, yeah, I like that series a lot, but I think I think Ash says year one is better, I believe, and I have to agree with him on that. As
Yeah, I
far
would
as
agree.
Frank Miller Daredevil, I mean Batman stories,
I would totally agree. Yeah.
and I said Adventures of the Outsiders, Batman and the Outsiders. That's a series that not a whole lot of people remember, but it was. I thought it was a great series. I think it's the best thing Mike Barr ever wrote,
Mm-hmm.
and it like I said, it was straight up a better book than the Justice League at the time. They'd have more interesting characters, and I was a fan of Justice League Detroit, but this one, it just felt more. I don't know. I said it just it seemed and Conway was writing Justice League, so I wasn't anything against the writer or the characters. I just really liked the Outsiders and Teen Titans. Well, they're the Teen Titans. I mean, that was
Yeah.
we were all reading that.
This was a great Titans run. I mean, you had some amazing art. You had good stories. I mean, this is one of those runs I think you could pick up and not have to have a lot of back knowledge about DC. You could jump into it fairly easily and really enjoy yourself.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely. Any trade that has the first one will have DC Comics Presents 26. That was the intro back when they used to put 16-page introductions to new books in other books. And then, that, and then 1 through hell. You can just go straight from 1 through the Judas Contract. And I'm not saying that it doesn't stay good after that, because it absolutely does. But that like 1 through 44 or whatever it was, it was hard to put any of those issues down.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think this is a great run. Definitely worth picking up if you haven't there. And yeah, that's Alan Davis there drawing Ghost Hitler. I'll be honest. I know I read The Outsiders. I do not remember. I don't remember this, and I do not remember Ghost Hitler. That there has to be. I don't know. Did you read that run?
Yes. But again, I said, I have read so many freaking comics that even if I had a photographic memory, I couldn't remember everything.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, and also why, like, they're fighting people, and then anyway, a lot of questions I've got here. So anyway, very, very good. Do we have a sex bot in the chat? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe they're late. I mean, we went through all the Dynamite stuff, so clearly they've messed up. All right, so some stuff in the 90s. How about we were talking crossovers? A lot of crossovers all of a sudden. We got Darkness Batman. Did you like Batman's crossed over just about everybody though? Did you have a favorite of any of the ones that he did?
Yes, the John Byrne Captain America crossover set in World War II.
Okay, yeah, that was a good one.
Where the Joker turns on the Red Skull and it says I may be a homicidal maniac, but everybody hates Nazis. And before anybody that you disagree with became one, it meant something. So I mean, it was a really neat moment. And Byrne, I think, captured Robin and Bucky as who they were at the time, kids.
Yeah,
and it was just a really
that was a good
issue.
Issue.
That couldn't have been any better if Roy Thomas had written it.
Yeah, no, that was a good issue. I agree. Ironically, I did a review of that issue. It's up, and I divide. But go search on it, folks. Look for that one. It's where the Joker goes full Antifa. I don't remember. I do kind of a funny headline. It's meant to be a joke. But if you want to lose your faith in humanity, check out the comments in that video, because people just lose their minds over that video, and they take it all the way into debating if the Joker is Antifa or not. It was a joke. It was a joke, folks, because the Joker made the comment, that you said, Eric, that I may be a homicidal maniac, but I'm not a Nazi. And then he fights the Red Skull, and they get to brawling, and that's kind of the whole joke of the comic, or a big part of it is that moment. And But man, the comments are brutal in that video. They're just people pissed. Like, it's one of the most ugliest. It was that the two videos I got the most negative kind of insanity is that one, and then I did one a long time ago just talking about how they handled nudity in comics, and clearly people came to that video to see nudity in comics, and I did not deliver it. So they were pissed. They were super pissed. But anyway, all good stuff. Tomb Raider. A lot of people forget that Tomb Raider sold incredibly well for a long period of time. Like that comic's rarely talked about, but that was the number one comic many months in a row. And it's kind of escaped people's notice completely. Don't know why, but anyway.
There's a lot of things from the 90s that have kind of fallen down the memory hole.
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's weird to me, but that title dominated some of the Transformers at the time. There's a period, I think, between 97 and about 2000, 2001, where if you look at the top selling comics every month, it was not what you would expect.
Well, you know what I think really helped, titles like Tomb Raider?
Yeah.
Was the amount of push it got from Wizard magazine, which was the be all end all for industry trades at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It basically, like, it said if Oprah had you on her show to tout your book, you were going to sell 1 million copies just from being on Oprah.
It's true.
The Wizard effect, I think, kept a lot of, they were very heavy into image at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the mid 90s, you had stuff like Tomb Raider, Witchblade, Darkness. Basically, if they were on it, you were, it was a great benefit to you as a creator or the company you were creating for.
It was. Wizard sold in my shop as one of the top 10 comics, if you want to call it that. It was, everybody bought it. And Wizard, I mean, what's strange about it is Wizard, I think, laid out a roadmap of how you get new companies started. I mean, Image, despite the power of the creators, we cannot question. I mean, Todd and Rob and Jim and everything they were doing was powerful. But they obviously had a lot of shipping delays. There were a lot of issues with some of the creators, not all of them. But Wizard, I think, propped it up and made them, I mean, not only did they sell a lot more because of it, but they also provided glue between the delays that people put up with the things a lot longer than I think they would have if Wizard wasn't there kind of keeping it together. And like the lack of a Wizard magazine, online equivalent or printed today, I think if you're an indie company, one of your strategies, if you're an AWA, for example, or even if you're some of the crowdfunding folks, if some level of magazine like that is done very, very well as a marketing tool, kind of cheerleader, if you will, but that would be very effective.
It's not just comics. I remember Movie Line magazine. Oh, they would tout indie movies, and there are really no in-print music magazines left of any note. I mean, you can still go online and find Paste, although they're almost all political now. And but I said those trades, those industry trades, for lack of a better term, did help a lot of stuff. I said, Wizard could make or break you in those days.
Oh, for sure. And they did, as people are pointing out, they did heavily favor advertisers for sure. And that was their business model. You paid them, they promoted you more. It was classic marketing. And it was structured though. So that's, you could argue YouTube is the equivalent today. The problem is YouTube is unorganized. So people have done little things, but it's still, it's not an organized system by any stretch of imagination. And Wizard was something that could be bridge.
Well, Wizard was founded by Alan Freed.
Yep.
There's a reference for all you old timers.
Nice. Very nice. But it's amazing. It's amazing that there really hasn't been somebody to pick up that torch. The comic news sites today, it seems like it's a lot more of a game of, say whatever we have to do in order to keep getting free comps. But that's the whole name of the game. I mean, I know for a fact a lot of comic news sites are scared to give a bad review because if they do, they won't get the free comps anymore. And that is what that's the reason why they're in the game. They're not making much money off advertising. So it's about getting free comics, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, I guess nowadays, I guess nobody will start one up because obviously there, you can make the case that print is dying, but with CBR and Newsarama and Bleeding Cool and
Yep. Well,
yeah, I'm giving myself a headache.
no, but to that point, I mean, John. Oh, it's John Malin. Hey, John. He said, the internet made Wizard irrelevant. It made Wizard the magazine irrelevant. The challenge is, or the problem is, there should have been a somebody on the internet making a site, like the ones you mentioned, just not. They have to be filled with people who want to make money off the industry, off the hobby, off the comics themselves, not use it as a backdoor to get into comics, not give really happy fuzzy reviews to certain editors so they hope they can get comics. I mean, a lot of the writers we have now came from Bleeding Cool, came from CBR. People who write for Newsarama or whatever it is now are completely they openly say, I hope I'm writing a comic someday in the interviews. So they're pitching for the job while they're writing their articles. The difference with I think some of Wizard is that there was a desire to make money. Anyway,
hey, Atomic Hound just said I was a member of FOOM.
Oh, there you go.
Why there? I was a member of the Mary Marvel Marching Society.
You didn't go old enough there.
Not really. I would have been the youngest member.
I think you could harness something. I do think putting a magazine out like Wizard would be tough in today's market. I think it even Ash points out people want something physical. They do, but it still is going to be tough to distribute.
Tomorrow's makes back issue and alter ego, but those are basically aimed at my demographic. Back issue covers the Bronze Age, and alter ego is finally kind of transitioning from Golden Age to Silver Age, so you get a little bit of both. But I don't know. I think unfortunately, John's right. I don't know that people need to know stuff right now, and from making videos. When you're talking about what's happening right now, 5 days later, that video may never get, might not get 10 more views in its life because we're on to the next thing.
Yep.
By the time you could get those magazines out now, you couldn't do it of a news of the day thing. It would just have to be, features and things like that. And I don't know if, today's ADD audience, would go for that.
Yeah, it's got to be different. I mean, I think it starts with where's the money at, and the challenge is that if you're making a comic news site, it's not going to make you rich on the surface. It's going to have to be something that you work at and you get kind of creative with. And so if your ultimate goal is to somehow be hired by a writer and do something be hired as a writer for Marvel. And that's the reason why you're doing this online news site. That's it's a means to an end. The end being another job. Then you're not really going to change or disrupt anything. You're going to be too terrified to really do anything different, and there's not enough money in it to really live off of it. So you're stuck in this weird middle ground where you can't actually put something together. But anyway, I still hope. I think if somebody could just come up with something that anyway, we've talked this to death. How about this? How about some of these? We got I think 2 Byrnes and Mignola here.
Yeah, it's so Hitler makes another comeback here in Fantastic Four.
Oh no, this is the one Hitler.
It's a hate monger storyline who was actually revealed to be Hitler in a previous story many moons before this one.
Yeah.
And then actually did use Hitler after that, because I remember, I think he's on the cover of the next issue.
Yeah.
Secret Wars 2 gets a lot of heat, but I actually liked it. I mean, it had its moments. There were some books that Shooter made everybody put the Beyonder in their books, and I know some were less than thrilled with that, but John Byrne, who I know is they didn't come any more curmudgeon-y than him, wrote one of the best issues of his tenure at Fantastic Four during that month that he had to shoehorn the Beyonder in. But so I kind of like that. And, Rocket Raccoon. I did not read this series. I remember his first appearance, I think, in Hulk 271.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm acting like he's not now the most overused, character in the last 15 years of Marvel. But yeah, I have no recollection of this miniseries whatsoever.
It was a good series. It is funny though. If you go and you look at it, it will not remind you of the Rocket Raccoon we're seeing in the movies today. It's definitely a different. It's an earlier take. It's a rougher take on the character. But Mignola, I will always enjoy Mignola, but don't like that recent He-Man cover he did. And Secret Wars 2. Secret Wars 2 was strange. It was actually a preview of what we've gotten today. It's a lot of sitting around and talking, and an alarming amount of eating goes on in that series. There is very little action, and there is a lot of like hanging out in an apartment, having food, having some more food, going out for food. Like I read through it, I'm like, good God, the pacing on this is all over the place. But anyway, we've had some recent books. Come on, now of course I'm gonna. Here's here. So now we'll go exactly the opposite. Evil Black Cat to further back. You've now I'm confident you've seen and gone through all of these, right, Eric?
Yes.
Yeah. This is a good Brave and the Bold, by the way. This was, which strikes me. Why don't you think something, some kind of comic like this, some kind of maybe not Brave and the Bold, some kind of anthology comic or something along this would be smart to do instead of doing a bunch of round robin weird pitches that.
Yeah, I would like to see another, whether it's a team up or 2-in-1 at Marvel or a DC Comics Presents or Brave and the Bold at DC. Now, DC did try this again in 2008. It lasted about 35 or so issues. It was largely out of continuity and a lot, but there were a lot of really fun stories. This one, if I remember correctly, does have the 16-page preview of Batman and the Outsiders, which is what this book was canceled to make room for.
That's right.
Nowadays, they would just add another Bat book, but even then, in the 70s and 80s, Batman and Superman were in 6 or 7 books a month.
They've done this Legion cover a few times. This same kind of layout. This is definitely one that in fact they've even kind of done parodies of it more recently. But I like the slogan said that it's a new DC. There's no stopping us now. Of course, this is coming after it had been almost completely stopped, I believe. So,
well, they figure after that they could say what they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true. I mean, we survived, so we're not dead yet. I mean, maybe that could be the slogan. Now that. Anyway. All right. How about Batman? There's so many crossovers of Batman aliens. How about this Jokerized alien? Do you remember this?
I do not.
This was kind of this felt like we jumped the shark a little bit. As opposed to there's just Witchblade hanging out with a wet shirt. People know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's those early Witchblades. Clothing was apparently optional.
Yeah.
Now Gen 13, I can't tell the issue. I can't read that.
This is number 18.
Okay. I like that series, but I don't think it really hit its stride until Scott Lobdell took over in the 40s or something like that, where he kind of turned into a satire on pop culture.
Yeah, it was. I think that was the 30s. I thought it was earlier than the 40s. But yeah, I think that Scott did a good job on that book, and I think that was the kind of the vibe they were trying to get to with the Red Hood and the Outlaws title he was. I think they were trying to kind of recreate some of that similar feel. But I'm not. Feels like that would be difficult for them to do in 2021.
Oh, it'd be impossible because one of the things that the title relied heavily on was the sexuality of the characters. I mean, just how there. Anytime Caitlin would get in a fight, there'd be very little of. She would look like the Witchblade cover by the end of it, and it would always happen so innocently. But but again, it was from a time where everybody didn't have a giant stick up their butt. weren't offended at everything that they didn't agree with. And, if it wasn't back in those days, if something wasn't for you, you just put it down and moved on, as opposed to taking to Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, Evil Black Cat. I knew it was 45 or 46.
Later. I would have sworn it was in the 30s, but that's much later. And I thought, now I've got to, like, what happened from like the mid 20s to 40? I know.
I'll tell you what, Gary Frank was the artist on a bunch of them. Then Ed Bennis took over when Scott Lobdell did, and so it didn't, hell between, J. Scott Campbell, Frank Bennis. I mean, hell, you even had some Adam Warren issues. So, I mean, it didn't. There was a lot of good art in that series, and it just took. I think it took a while for the writing to catch up, because in the original, the first couple issues, it was still definitely style over substance.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think that the book was, I mean, it was designed to be kind of a quirky superhero team, very much of in the 90s of kind of, they had all the kind of the right mix of the team. And I feel like there was a lot of character design, but not really an idea of what to do with the characters. But it did catch up, and it was pretty good. And yes, DC does have the rights to Gen 13 now. And it seems like it would be a good idea to put something like that out again. But
they've tried several times. In fact, I think Karen, how you pronounce his name, might have been the artist on one of the iterations, but they haven't come close to getting it right, because they made the mistake of taking it way too seriously every time after that.
Yeah, that's true. They don't lean into the absurdity of it. All right, so we gotta. How about this? This is a mix of comics here. What did you? First of all, did you read any of these?
Yes, I actually bailed on Marvel after the first issue.
Yes,
because I was on Team Peter David on that.
Okay, you did it for that reason. I see.
Well, no, the fact that Marvel was absolute shit.
I wish I need to. I'm going to do a live stream, because what I learned is that Joe Corallo has never read Marvel, and he got me to read that whatever that Our Love Is Real book, and refresh my memory with that thing. So I feel I have to inflict Marvel, because Marvel is, I mean, a lot of people complain about current comics and things going on. And now is the time to downvote this stream, by the way, with this screen up. But like, I don't think anybody can really digest how terrible comics can be unless they've read Marvel.
Well, yeah, at least, and as someone who watched, your Trouble retrospective in its entirety.
Yes.
Trouble was bad in kind of a fun way. Yeah. I mean, it was so cartoonishly bad that it was real easy to go, okay, I don't care what they say. This isn't in anybody's canon. So you just, you could just let it just go to its most absurd, conclusion. Marvel, I mean, like I said, I didn't read all 6 of them. It just seemed like that was, I don't know. The one I read wasn't nearly as much fun as any of the issues of Trouble. Yeah. Emma Frost was just there. I mean, it just, it was back when.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, like if you're looking at these three, I think I agree with you. The Trouble is not a good comic. Now we are doing the Mark Millar interview soon, as once he gets through this current blitz of his new show coming out. But I've got to ask him, like, you got to go into Trouble. But there was a so bad it's good aspect to Trouble. Those covers, though, I always wondered, like, what in the world? Because the covers had nothing to do with what was in the comic, nor really resembled the characters in the comic. Like, I don't even know. Like, they said they were trying to appeal to a girl audience for like the old romance comics, but I'm just telling you, this is one of the nicer Trouble covers, and there's no way that's you know exactly who that's appealing to.
I'm guessing that maybe somebody at Marvel was either dating one of them or wanted to date one of them, and
it had to be there has to be a terrible story behind this. And yes, I will ask him what he prefers for his last name. I've gone through a number of interviews, and people have called him both, and he just smiles and goes with it. So I think he's just super polite. But we gotta get this. But yeah, Trouble is like I said, bad, but so bad it's good in some areas. I mean, it definitely, and it's not continuity, so you don't have to worry about the fact that Aunt May is really Spider-Man's mom because she slept around a lot. But Emma Frost, I'm with you. Emma Frost was just kind of there. Now they've brought it. This isn't canon. They've been taking aspects of this series and bringing it into the Marauders. And then there's Marvel, which really has to be seen to be believed.
Well, if I remember correctly, the Emma Frost series was her formative years, when she was a teenager.
Yeah.
And again, that period of Marvel between like 2000, 2004, outside of Marvel Knights, there wasn't a whole lot of anything worth.
It was a dark time.
Yeah, it was. For all the good Jamas seems to be doing it AWA, he didn't bring any of it to Marvel.
No. It was and that's true. And Marvel again, Marvel has to be seen to be believed. It is the series that like midway through the comic, it kind of gives up on itself and just like doesn't render the pages and just puts the artist notes in, or the writer's notes in there. And it is amazing. But anyway, we'll move on from this because it's kind of we're getting a pervy kind of feel. Here you go. Again, more recent stuff. There's the Button storyline, everybody's favorite. This was during the run when people were still, I think, into Tom King on Batman at this moment.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, though, didn't Joshua Williamson write the Batmans in this storyline, or did King write the Batmans? Because I know in the Price, Williamson wrote those 2 issues of Batman also.
He this one's listed as Tom King.
Okay.
And it again, I think people had not. They're still on board. It really, I think there's a lot of reverse engineering going on in people where they believe they always hated King on Batman, but during this moment, this is early issue 21, people were still into Tom King, but the cracks are starting to show a little bit. But we hadn't gotten to the War of Jokes and Riddles, I think, where But this is still where people are on board.
It'd have been nice if this had ended up meaning anything.
That's true too. Like
it
really didn't. The Button stuff just exactly.
But your point on King, the double date issue with Lois, Clark, Bruce, and Selena, that's still one of the because you don't get one-offs anymore. That's one of the best one-offs I've read in years, and that was King. So
that's true. I think that it's interesting how things the kind of the wedding and then the nightmare storyline after that, it seemed to poison backward into the previous issues, because that double date issue was fun, and it was intended to kind of be fun and light, and the characters were written kind of being a little more comfortable. Batman was a little bit more casual. Catwoman and Lois were getting drunk, as I recall, and it was fun. But what happened was, I think after the aborted wedding and kind of the stuff that came after it, suddenly people started going further back and were saying, well, here's Batman acting like a goof and everything. And it almost poisoned the well. Because I remember defending that issue. People were ragging on it on Twitter, and I thought that double date issue was fun.
Well, anybody that's ever had a horrendous breakup, you go back and start reassessing the good times, and you end up convincing yourself they weren't also always that good.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And I think that you can apply that to a comic book run when one of your creators just absolutely loses the plot.
Yeah. It's an interesting, I don't know. It was an interesting moment in time. Aquaman and the Others. This didn't sell terribly well. I don't remember why they did this. They were trying to make Aquaman a bigger deal, and they got Jurgens to write it. But it didn't take.
I think I'm going to assume that this was around the time they had decided there was going to be an Aquaman movie.
Yeah.
So, and it's predated it by a few years, but I guess they figured if we make a second Aquaman book if they both take off, because the Aquaman books in New 52 and in Rebirth, until who took over, were really good. And I figured if they could get another really good one, they got a good writer on it, that they were trying to make him more of a thing. And it turns out all they needed to do was hire Jason Momoa, but who knew?
That's all they needed to do. Nothing that big. All right. Now, okay, we've gone back again. So we saw this Avengers cover earlier, but it's ants. It's Scarlet Witch has got an ant problem.
Yeah, that's that's part of the 2-part Ultron storyline, where Hank thinks he's Ant-Man again, and he shows up at Avengers Mansion and doesn't recognize anybody, so he attacks them, and for a while he's able to get the drop on all of them, just because I said they're so surprised, and he has ways of disrupting the vision. Scarlet. It's a really good story. I said recommend it to anybody. Read the Shoot or Run. The Champions. I believe that was one of the John Byrne drawn issues.
I think so. This was to be very, very early Byrne.
Yeah. Because he did 11 through 15, and I can't remember if Isabella was still on the book or if it was Bill Mantlo by then.
On 14, yes, Isabella was on the book.
Okay, so he wrote them all. Then Mantlo ended up writing so much stuff in the 70s. I guess now I'm just attributing him to things he didn't do.
Yeah.
And the Defenders, that was an interesting time. Doctor Strange had kind of gone wonky and became this character called the Red Raja.
Yeah.
And when that storyline ended, he left for a while. So you basically had Hulk, Nighthawk, Valkyrie, and Hellcat, who was a brand new superhero at the time and was just, so happy to be there. And I think, I can't remember if, Steve Gerber and then I think David Kraft were the writers. And it was just a bizarre time. Good stuff, but really strange.
Yeah. No, it definitely.
Okay. I'm being told that Mantlo wrote the last 2 issues. I was stopped by a few. Okay.
There you go. What we got? How about Infinity Inc., Jerry Ordway? Again, Roy Thomas on this one.
Yeah. Roy Thomas at DC in the 80s, between All-Star Squadron, Infinity Inc., and Young All-Stars. I'm a huge Roy Thomas fan. In fact, he's on my all-time comic book Mount Rushmore. If not for his talent, but for his being the guy that's been like the caretaker for the hobby for so many years. But he is a tremendous writer in his own right, and he really poured his heart and soul into his 80s DC books.
This was again, these are some fine books. This was a really good run of Swamp Thing during this time. This is this Batman the Outsiders was again a really fun run. I think that's Alan Davis still, isn't it?
What issue is that?
Number 12.
No, that would be Aparo still.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, Davis took over right around the time they brought Looker in, so it'd be like somewhere in the 20s, and I think he did the art through the 30s.
Yeah. It's John Aparo, people are saying. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm looking at this screen, tiny thumbnail, and that the characters. Anyway, we're good. Here we go. Again, going over to some Marvel stuff. This was this John Byrne was still this was still during his run, or was it 260? Yeah, I remember this cover being very weird. Because Byrne had these very detailed covers in a lot of cases during this time period, and it felt like they were experimenting with some different things.
Yeah, my problem with the Byrne Fantastic Four is I always start at the beginning of the run, and then I end up getting distracted about halfway through. So I'm way more familiar with the first half of his run than the second.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I really can't speak to this particular storyline or what was going on in the book at the time, but
It was a good. We talked to the editor a bit ago. That was a great interview. It was a good run. It was one of those that Marvel. I think there's a lot more money in there that we can get into. Peter is bagging on me. No, I'm not in a basement. It's actually very well lit where he is. Breen knows. A Hulk. Were you reading either of these? The Hulk, a Spider-Man issue?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that Hulk, I believe, is from like 1978.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember. Yeah, I think Stern was on the book, and they were making the Hulk slightly more intelligent. It was more than just Hulk smash by then, and they were starting to kind of get into his psyche a little bit, because Doc Samson was a regular in the title.
Yep.
And it had more, the first like 200 through 230-ish or so was a very interesting time for the character. And yeah, I said it was definitely worth checking out, because he started using words like taunt and things you never heard him say. And he was actually, a little bit smarter than we remembered. And, that didn't always carry over into the Defenders, but at least in his own book, he was, pretty interestingly written. And the Peter Parker era, the Black Cat, Black Suit era, I would argue was as good, if not better, than Amazing Spider-Man for a lot of that time.
I would agree with you. I think Spectacular was a great book during this time. You had a lot of good fleshing out of his supporting cast. I thought it was a really solid. This was a solid run of Spider-Man. Again, all of these though strike me as, of these, maybe the Byrne is probably the one that's easiest to get your hands on. But like this Hulk run and this Spider-Man run, there are trades out there, but they're not easy to pick up.
I think the Hulk, the Masterworks might finally be getting close to this era. And there's the old Essentials, but beyond that, I don't think there's ever been any paperback trades of this era of the Hulk.
Yeah. And it baffles my mind, because there's definitely an audience for this stuff. And in particular, if you've got a bunch of people out there who are, upset by the current comics, they don't like what you have, then be smart. You own all the IP. Why wouldn't you just start putting out some of this stuff? I mean, your customers are telling you in many cases, it's not as good as, Byrne during the 80s or whatever it happens to be. So great, dress it up, put it in a book, get it out on the shelves, take money from everyone. Like that feels like a really easy goal right now.
Well, we are talking about a company that's doing an epic collection of the West Coast Avengers with the storyline that was borrowed for WandaVision, but it's coming out months after the show.
Yeah, sure.
So
Same Soldier.
Yeah, that's so I'm not surprised that they, keep missing these opportunities.
It's they know the shows are coming. I've heard the argument of like, well, they don't, the comic is disconnected from the movies, but you could go on YouTube or any number of websites that would tell you the exact schedule of release for these shows. Like the random people outside know when these comics are coming out. You're telling me you can't, you're more misinformed than just various people who are watching the Bob Iger streams or the Kevin Feige streams about movies. You can get this stuff done. You're just reprinting a trade. It's not impossible. It's weird.
May I answer a question?
Oh, you can take it away. I'm just going to drink more.
You murdered that guy.
Yeah.
That would be her first appearance in All-Star Comics issue 58. Now, there's a little bit of a story behind that. Wally Wood was the artist on the book at the time, and he was known for cheesecake art going all the way back to EC Comics. And they decided that he was going to keep making her boobs in the boob window bigger until he was told to stop.
Oh, this is way back up the chat. All right. Yeah, I was trying to pull up the question. I saw this go out.
Well, my chat keeps freezing, so I happened to catch that.
There we go.
And what happened was Jeanette Kahn, she got wind of it and put a stop to that immediately. So the boob window closed, and the breasts shrunk.
I see. and then kind of have returned over the years, and then also shrunk again.
Yes.
Zeta beams is the culprit. Yeah. There's something. It's always weird when the body types radically shift in all directions. By the way, in the 90s, like there was a lot of enhancement that took place, and then a lot of reduction surgery in the early 2000s.
Yeah,
it's just is a hell of a time to be a plastic surgeon in New York.
They well, and then Amanda Connor, got away with it because for obvious reasons. I mean, she in her own book. The one that lasted 27 issues, starting like 2009. The issues that she did, they were just huge. In fact, there's the last issue of her title is issue 27. It's worth $75. The description in the Overstreet price guide is some like impressive cleavage something. It's I did not get that, but it's something to that effect. And so I said it's by that time, she was quite, what was that line in Dragnet? Impressive, bordering on spectacular.
Yeah, there you go. That'd be an interesting thing to do at some point. We'll put up the body types through the years, and we'll just chart it year by year and see it go. The problem is you have different artists, of course, in the mix that draw it in different ways, but it is, I can't just randomly pull up a boob window here, you Iron.
Well, you just showed a cover that Dale Eaglesham had drawn. That's Sinestro.
Yeah,
he was offended by it. So when he was drawing Justice Society, he made it more like a cozy wing. There's another reference for you old timers than a window.
There were shutters in the window. Yeah, there we have because we've jumped the shark. We've jumped the window. So what do we got here? Oh, here we go. I was never a huge Sergeant Rock fan, I admit, but I'm assuming you read through plenty of those.
Not as many as I would have liked. I didn't really get into war comics because I was too busy reading superhero ones, but now when I get a chance to, I will. And I probably should have been all along, because there was some really good stuff done in DC war comics, because they were more real. I'm not going to say realistic, but they were less gung-ho than, say, Sergeant Fury. So because and DC had a much larger war, division, with our fighting forces, our Army at War, which became Sergeant Rock, Star Spangled War stories that became the Unknown Soldier, and then there were, some GI Combat. So they took their war comics pretty seriously.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, there was a little bit more serious aspect to it, and that was a business for them. I mean, it was a category where they had multiple books during different times that they were pushing. I mean, DC did maintain they had some war books, they had some hero books, they had some. I don't know that they had much of a sense of romance, but they had.
Well, they had about 7 or 8 issue romance line.
Yeah, that's true. It's an interesting, it was interesting how there was more kind of stratification back then. And welcome back, Joe, who's gone and done another stream. So bad news, everybody, you could have been listening to Joe on a different stream that was probably better than this one. No, at least for my part, Eric's been great. But anyway, I've just been, we've gone through a lot of breasts over the last 2 hours. That's all I know. Anyway, so yeah, this was, I think this is it. I think this is where it wraps up. It is.
How can you top Headband Supergirl?
I can't. Yeah, let's go back to Headband Supergirl. Come on, let's. I mean, this was the era. This was a painful. You watched that? Did you watch? I drug Brian through it. Did you watch the Supergirl movie? You have to have seen that.
Yeah, I saw it many years after it came out.
Yeah, that was very painful.
Yeah. Well, but surprisingly, the series was not. I'm talking about the comic book series. not the
Right.
current Supergirl series, which is painful.
I haven't watched much of the current series at all, but that's
Take the win.
Painful. Yeah, take the win. There you go. Yeah, this series was pretty good. I actually this comic was not bad at all.
Well, it had something that you don't get in modern comics: the supporting cast of non-powered people, and that's something I really, really miss. In today's comics, and it's one of the umpteen reasons why I don't read many, if any, of them.
Yeah. The supporting casts are very generic today. One thing that you really notice if you read through the 80s and 90s, some of the earlier eras, that the supporting cast, the characters had unique personalities, and there were differences, and there was a healthy amount of. I mean, Spider-Man supporting cast alone was enough to fill multiple books, but they were different and unique, and it was it seems like now we're just checking the box, and even then the supporting cast is much smaller than it used to be.
Well, there's no room for them because every issue is part of an event.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can't. There's no time to get your supporting cast covered with black goo when you're doing other things. So. Well, I think in generals, we'll start to wind down a little bit here. I mean, I'll go back the other direction so we can let everybody know who came late, what they missed. If you did, get here, if you've been enjoying this, throw a like in. Why not? Joe, I don't know where he was doing some stream. I don't remember what. Maybe you can tell us what in the chat, and we can send people over to that. But I mean, come on, look at the things. If you're coming in late, you missed some of these comics. These are excellent. You had this. Look at that. Swamp Thing, Outsiders, Avengers covered in ants. There's the Button and the Sinestro issue. Here's this stuff. Huh? Joe, you missed all these. How could we go wrong with that? But yeah, this has been an unusual day of covers. It feels like the last week of April has been very, very odd. I just, as I was pulling kind of the comics that come out traditionally during this week, it was an odd week. It's always been a very odd week of comics. But anyway, any as we're going back through, any big favorites that you had here, Eric, looking over it again? Like if you were picking your best?
Well, as far as covers, I would be remiss if I didn't take this time to extol the virtues of Gil Kane. He did the Green Lantern cover, and he's hell, he did more covers at Marvel in the 70s probably than anybody else. And that's probably because Kirby was working for DC for half of that time. But
excellent.
He did the cover for Giant Size X-Men there. Yeah.
It's no, for sure. There's some amazing books. Well, Eric, where can people find you? We mentioned at the beginning, but you've got a YouTube channel? Search under Eric. You're looking for the logo with the blue circle.
Yes. I said, occasionally I will make a video. I did one a couple weeks ago. I do videos with Wes on Thinking Critical. In fact, Joe and I do videos with Wes every week called Comic Book Retrospective, where we pick a storyline. So far, we've done the Kree Skrull War, the Avengers Defenders War, that Batman Ra's al Ghul, and we picked a Barry Allen and a Wally West issue of The Flash to dissect. And next week we are doing the same with Fantastic Four 51, which is This Man, This Monster.
Nice.
And I think 285, which is the issue of the Fantastic Four where the little kid is such a fan that he lights himself on fire trying to be like his idol. And he ends up, mortally wounding himself, and how Johnny deals with that. But so we do those on Monday, and they usually come out later in the week. So that, and still got the auctions on Saturday nights, and next Wednesday, Criminal Cast, something that Ash hosts on his channel, and we do with Skip and Tosh and Nalo, where we take Ed Brubaker book, and basically, I won't say the word that's been used, but let's just say Ed Brubaker fares very well on this channel. And, I'm particularly proud of that. I think that they do very well. They carry me through it.
Excellent. Well, folks, if you're on the, I know Wes does have his comics aficionados chat in the morning. I'm not on that one. I'm going to sleep, which is as I'm recovering from doing all the skiing last week, and we'll be on next week. And I yes, I promise we will. I'll find some Power Girl boob windows. We can examine them over time, so everybody can look forward to that. But here's a question. We'll kind of end with this. Who did more covers, Eric? Gil Kane or Dave Cockrum?
Oh, it wasn't even close. Kane.
Kane. Okay. Solid. I would assume so with his kind of his reach and all of that. But that's what we've got. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming to the chat. And thanks Mumbles as always for roasting me through the entire chat. You stuck out the entire thing, and you roasted me consistently through it. So very good. Appreciate all the support for the channel. I keep throwing suggestions, like I mentioned. Lots of people sent me lots of great ideas. These are lots of fun, and yeah, just have a great time. And Eric, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having me back.
All right, we'll do it again real soon. So thanks everybody. Have a great weekend.
Good night, kids.